President Trump's administration has ordered its embassies abroad to pause new applications for students and exchange visitor visas.
Travel ban impacting 12 countries will take effect Monday. The president also confirming that he spoke with the Chinese president this morning.
Not long ago, American travelers enjoyed the immense privilege of visa-free access to a vast majority of countries around the globe. With one of the most powerful passports in the world, U.S. citizens could book spontaneous getaways, hop on planes with minimal paperwork, and enter dozens of foreign lands with little more than a passport scan at the border. However, recent years have witnessed a noticeable shift, driven by political tensions, immigration policy recalibrations, and in some cases, reciprocal treatment. Several nations that once welcomed Americans with open arms have changed their entry requirements. As the world reevaluates how borders function in a new era of global challenges, American travelers are finding themselves navigating more bureaucratic hurdles than ever before. Before we start, smash the like and subscribe buttons for more updates. One of the most significant and symbolic examples of this shift is the European Union's forthcoming visa requirement under the ETIAS European Travel Information and Authorization System program. Although not a traditional visa in the strictest sense, the ETIAS will be mandatory for all U.S. citizens entering the Schengen area beginning in 2025. The system is designed to enhance security by pre-screening travelers before they arrive. It's an online application process, quick by visa standards, but it marks a distinct pivot from the decades of visa-free European access Americans have enjoyed. Countries such as France, Italy, Spain, and Germany, once a seamless part of any U.S. tourist's itinerary, will soon be behind a digital wall of pre-authorization. The shift reflects growing security concerns in Europe, increased scrutiny over migration, and the desire for reciprocal policies, since Europeans have long had to acquire electronic travel authorizations to visit the U.S. While the ETIAS is not yet in force, its implementation is a definitive move that changes the landscape of transatlantic travel and signals a broader global trend. Meanwhile, another notable transformation has taken place in Brazil. For years, the South American giant maintained a reciprocal visa policy with the United States, meaning Americans needed a visa to enter Brazil just as Brazilians did to enter the U.S. In 2019, Brazil made a surprising move under President Jair Bolsonaro. It waived visa requirements for Americans in an effort to boost tourism and forge closer ties with the United States. The gesture was applauded by many in the travel industry, and U.S. tourism to Brazil saw an uptick. However, in 2023, Brazil reversed this decision, reinstating visa requirements for U.S., Canadian, and Australian travelers, citing the need for reciprocity and a more balanced diplomatic footing. Now, Americans planning to explore the lush Amazon, the vibrant beaches of Rio, or the cultural richness of Salvador must first secure a visa, a process that includes documentation, fees, and processing time. The return of the visa requirement is more than a procedural inconvenience. It signals a recalibration of Brazil's foreign policy and a reassertion of sovereign equality on the international stage. Turkey is another key example where American travelers now face a visa hurdle. Once a destination where Americans could simply show up and receive a visa on arrival, Turkey shifted its policy in 2020. The Turkish government phased out its visa on arrival scheme for several countries, including the US, in favor of an e-visa system. While the application is relatively simple and entirely online, it still represents a procedural barrier where none existed before. The change reflects Turkey's broader efforts to modernize its border controls and gather more pre-arrival information on visitors. For American tourists eyeing Istanbul's Byzantine wonders or the natural splendor of Cappadocia, this means planning ahead and having their digital paperwork in order. Though not onerous, the e-visa requirement illustrates the global shift toward tighter travel oversight, even in countries that rely heavily on tourism. Russia, with its storied history and vast cultural riches, has long posed a challenge for American travelers, but recent geopolitical developments have made entry significantly more complex. The requirement for U.S. citizens to obtain a visa is nothing new, but the process has grown considerably more demanding in recent years. In response to escalating tensions between Moscow and Washington, the Russian government has not only maintained, but reinforced its visa policies toward Americans. The application process is rigorous and includes an invitation letter, detailed itinerary, proof of accommodation, and biometric data. It also demands considerable lead time and patience. In the wake of diplomatic expulsions and a deepening rift over issues such as Ukraine, cybersecurity, and sanctions, U.S. travelers now face a more scrutinized bureaucratic process if they wish to experience the grandeur of St. Petersburg's palaces or the mystique of the Trans-Siberian Railway. Russia's visa regime serves as a stark reminder of how political relations directly shape the freedom of movement for ordinary citizens. China offers another compelling case. Although U.S. travelers have long required a visa to enter the People's Republic, the process has evolved into a more complex and scrutinized affair in recent years. What once was a relatively straightforward application now involves a more detailed vetting process. The Chinese government has tightened its entry protocols, citing national security and reciprocity, especially in the wake of rising U.S.-China tensions over trade, technology, and human rights. Even before the COVID-19 pandemic added health checks and quarantine layers, Americans had to furnish extensive documentation, including proof of flights, hotel bookings, and even past travel history. In 2024, while China did introduce limited visa-free pilot programs for some travelers from Europe and Asia to revive tourism, these waivers did not extend to U.S. citizens. Americans must still navigate a traditional visa application, attend in-person consulate appointments in many cases, and allow for a lengthier processing time. The stringent requirements mirror the geopolitical climate, underscoring the degree to which international diplomacy dictates the freedom of mobility. Each of these countries, Brazil, Turkey, Russia, China, and the European Union collectively, demonstrates a different facet of the new visa reality facing American travelers. Some changes are born of security concerns. Others stem from diplomatic reciprocity or technological modernization. All, however, point to a global recalibration of mobility norms that American citizens, once among the most privileged in terms of borderless access, must now adjust to. These policy changes reshape not only the logistics of travel, but also the cultural psyche of the traveler. What makes this transformation especially notable is the reversal of a long-standing assumption that American citizenship automatically translated into ease of movement. For decades, the U.S. passport acted as a golden key, opening doors across continents with little bureaucratic resistance. Now, travelers must pay closer attention to paperwork, deadlines, and the fine print of immigration policy. It's a new learning curve, and for many, it disrupts the spontaneity and freedom once synonymous with international adventure. This shift also has implications for the travel industry. Tour operators, airlines, and hospitality professionals who once marketed their services around the simplicity of travel are now adjusting their messaging and services. Visa advisory add-ons, document processing packages, and itinerary adjustments are becoming part of the new normal. For business travelers, these changes mean more than just inconvenience. They introduce new layers of planning and potential disruption to meetings, conferences, and transnational deals. For leisure travelers, the emotional impact is just as palpable. The sense that the world is a little less open, that a border once passed easily now comes with a price, literally and metaphorically. However, this is not solely a story of restriction, it's also one of adaptation. Digitalization, for instance, is playing a crucial role in how countries manage their visa systems. E-visas and pre-travel authorizations, such as ETIAS or Turkey's online visa portal, reflect a world moving toward more efficient, tech-driven border management. While these systems still impose requirements, they represent a modernization of the visa process that can, in many ways, be less burdensome than traditional consular visits. The new systems are often faster, more transparent, and less prone to the ambiguities of paper-based bureaucracy. In that light, the narrative is not entirely about losing freedom, but about renegotiating it within new frameworks. There's also the matter of reciprocity, a concept that now looms large in international travel dynamics. Countries are increasingly unwilling to offer U.S. citizens more access than their own citizens receive in return. This has spurred a global movement toward policy symmetry. Brazil's reinstatement of visa requirements was explicitly framed as a matter of reciprocity, as was the European Union's ETIAS mandate. Such actions reflect a new global awareness that mobility rights are political tools, not neutral entitlements. American travelers are, for perhaps the first time in generations, experiencing what millions of others have long dealt with: the bureaucratic realities of proving one's right to enter. The shift also brings into sharper focus the often overlooked privilege of visa-free travel. For citizens of many countries, visas are an inescapable part of the travel process, involving weeks or even months of paperwork, interviews, and uncertainty. The new restrictions placed on U.S. travelers serve as a humbling reminder of how fortunate Americans have been and still are in many respects. Even with these new requirements, the U.S. passport remains one of the most powerful in the world, offering visa-free or visa-on-arrival access to over 180 countries. But the trend line is clear. The world is moving toward more regulated and conditional movement. At the personal level, these changes demand a new mindset. Planning a trip now means more than choosing dates and destinations. It requires research, foresight, and sometimes assistance. For the seasoned traveler, these hurdles might be minor speed bumps, but for the first-time or infrequent traveler, they could be significant deterrents. The prospect of filling out forms, waiting for approvals, or paying unexpected fees can be enough to postpone or abandon travel dreams altogether. In that sense, visa policies shape not just geopolitics, but the contours of individual lives and aspirations. Looking ahead, it's likely that visa policies will continue to evolve in response to global challenges. The rise of digital surveillance, the impact of migration patterns, climate-driven displacement, and public health crises are all factors that will influence how countries manage their borders. American travelers should prepare not only for more countries to adopt systems like ETAs, but also for evolving protocols that may involve health data, biometric verification, or dynamic entry permissions based on real-time geopolitical developments. The passport, once the ultimate symbol of access, may soon be only one piece of a much more complex entry puzzle. For now, travelers must embrace a new era, one where preparation is paramount, spontaneity has limits, and access is no longer assumed. Whether booking a wine tour in Tuscany, planning an expedition to the Amazon, setting sights on the Hagia Sophia, riding the Trans-Siberian Rails, or walking the Great Wall, American tourists now share a more globalized experience, one that requires foresight, documentation, and humility. The shift is not entirely negative. It fosters a greater appreciation for the intricate web of policies that make global movement possible. It reminds travelers of the privilege of crossing borders freely and of the shared responsibility we all bear in respecting the rules of countries that welcome us. It also deepens the sense of purpose in travel. When entry requires effort, the journey becomes more meaningful. In this newly regulated landscape, travel isn't just a right. It becomes a more conscious, deliberate act of connection across borders. Another country that has recently changed its stance toward American travelers is India. Once a fairly straightforward destination in terms of entry, India has revised its visa policies multiple times over the past decade, with recent shifts placing more scrutiny on U.S. applicants. While an e-visa option is still available, the process is now more layered than it used to be, with a greater emphasis on security checks and detailed background information. The Indian government's focus on data collection, along with rising global cyber threats and regional tensions, has driven this more cautious approach. Unlike the earlier days when U.S. citizens could receive quick approvals for tourism or business visits, the current system requires a more in-depth evaluation and longer lead times for processing. In some cases, travelers report needing to provide additional proof of their itinerary, local contacts, and even financial solvency. These changes underscore India's recalibrated posture on border access, one that aligns with its own security priorities in a world that is increasingly concerned with digital and physical threats. For Americans planning to explore India's vast heritage, from the Taj Mahal to Kerala's backwaters, a bit more bureaucracy is now part of the journey. Egypt has also redefined its visa policies in ways that now affect U.S. citizens more directly. While the country still allows Americans to obtain a visa on arrival, it has increasingly encouraged, if not subtly mandated, the use of its e-visa system ahead of travel. More importantly, security protocols for American travelers have grown tighter in recent years, particularly following global incidents and the need to monitor who is entering sensitive historical and religious sites. Egypt's economy is deeply reliant on tourism, yet the government has made it clear that it won't sacrifice national security for open borders. The current system often includes background screening even for short stays, especially when visitors list plans to visit places like Sinai or other politically sensitive areas. Additionally, with shifting regional alliances and domestic political recalibrations, Egypt has increased coordination with foreign intelligence services, making the visa process more entwined with diplomatic undercurrents than ever before. For Americans, the ease of visiting the pyramids or sailing the Nile now comes with added layers of pre-travel scrutiny. Another country where American travelers now face stricter entry requirements is Nigeria, the most populous country in Africa and one of the continent's most dynamic economies. Historically, obtaining a Nigerian visa has always been somewhat complex, but in recent years, the process has become significantly more rigid for U.S. applicants. Multiple factors contribute to this. Nigeria's efforts to control immigration more tightly, heightened regional security concerns due to insurgencies in the North and Middle Belt, and a shift toward diplomatic reciprocity. The Nigerian government has emphasized transparency, background verification, and real-time database matching in their visa issuance process. American applicants must now prepare to provide a wealth of documentation, invitation letters, confirmed accommodations, and sometimes in-person interviews at consulates. There's also the requirement of biometric data collection and a detailed itinerary that explains the purpose and scope of the visit. Even business travel, which once enjoyed streamlined processes due to U.S. economic ties, now follows a stricter set of protocols. For Americans looking to experience the vibrant culture of Lagos or the natural beauty of Calabar, these added requirements reflect Nigeria's growing desire to protect its borders and manage foreign interactions on more equal terms. Saudi Arabia presents another striking case of evolving visa policy. In 2019, the kingdom surprised many by launching a new tourist visa program, one that for the first time allowed Americans and other nationals to visit for leisure purposes rather than solely for business or religious travel. While this marked a historic opening, the program came with very specific controls and restrictions. Americans can apply online, but the approval is not automatic and depends on multiple screening factors. In addition to the usual documentation, applicants are subject to evaluation based on prior travel history, reason for visit, and cultural conduct agreements. Saudi Arabia enforces strict codes of behavior and has used the visa application process as a tool to ensure incoming tourists understand and agree to these conditions. Moreover, geopolitical tensions, including strained U.S.-Saudi relations over issues such as Yemen and oil policy, have occasionally influenced visa issuance in subtle but real ways. Travel bans, delays, and increased rejections have been reported during periods of political friction. For Americans, this means that while Saudi Arabia has technically opened its doors more than ever before, entry is still tightly choreographed and conditional, reflective of both the country's cautious modernization and the diplomatic balancing act it maintains with Western nations. Bhutan, the remote Himalayan kingdom famous for its gross national happiness index, has never been a visa-free destination for Americans or most other foreigners. However, in recent years, Bhutan has modified its visa policy in ways that have made entry significantly more exclusive and expensive. Previously, American travelers could work through a government-approved tour operator, paying a flat daily fee that included accommodation, food, and a guide. While this system was already unique and restrictive compared to most global destinations, it ensured a controlled form of tourism aimed at preserving Bhutan's cultural and environmental integrity. In 2022, the country introduced sweeping changes, increasing its Sustainable Development Fee (SDF) to $200 per person per day and requiring all travelers, including Americans, to apply for a visa only through approved channels with full upfront payments. The higher fees and stricter itinerary scrutiny mean that spontaneous travel to Bhutan is virtually impossible. Every movement must be accounted for, and the visa approval hinges on the government's assessment of the visitor's alignment with Bhutan's conservation-focused tourism model. While this isn't politically motivated or a matter of reciprocal policy, it reflects an intentional strategy to limit the environmental and cultural footprint of tourism, even if that means fewer American dollars. For U.S. citizens, the door to Bhutan is still technically open, but it's more tightly guarded and built around values that prioritize preservation over accessibility. Together, these additional countries, India, Egypt, Nigeria, Saudi Arabia, and Bhutan underscore the growing complexity of international travel for American citizens. They also reveal how a diverse set of motivations, ranging from national security and environmental protection to cultural preservation and diplomatic symmetry, shape the contours of border access. Unlike past decades when American travelers could assume entry as a given in many corners of the world, today's landscape demands a new kind of global literacy. It's not enough to book flights and pack bags. Now, the savvy traveler must also be a diligent researcher, a cautious planner, and at times, a patient bureaucrat. In many ways, this emerging reality reshapes what travel means in the 21st century. Rather than discouraging exploration, these new conditions might instead enrich it, forcing travelers to understand the political, environmental, and cultural fabrics of the places they visit. For those willing to navigate the complexities, the reward is still profound: deeper experiences, greater awareness, and a renewed appreciation for the privilege of crossing borders in a world where access is increasingly earned, not assumed. If you like this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, leave your comments below and tell us, what are your thoughts on these visa changes? Which countries will surprise Americans most? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching and see you next time.